The alert flashed red across Jack Miller's screen for the third time that morning. He rubbed his tired eyes, looking at the same warning message that every station in the Orion Arm had received. Danger. Class X predator species detected. Avoid all contact. Edge Point Station hung at the outer rim of human space, a gleaming collection of metal and glass that sparkled against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside his small research lab, Jack leaned closer to his screen, studying the grainy footage that came with the warning. The creature moved like liquid metal through space. Its body stretched nearly 30 meters long, covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors in the starlight. Massive jaws lined with teeth longer than human arms opened wide as it tore through the hull of a research vessel as if it were paper. Miller, the sharp voice made him jump. Station Commander Roberts stood in the doorway, her face stern. "I assume you got the warning." "Yes, Mom." "The Razorfang footage is remarkable." Jack couldn't hide the excitement in his voice, even as the commander frowned at his choice of words. "Remarkable isn't the word I use for something that's destroyed 3 ships in the past week. The Galactic Council is establishing a quarantine zone. All research vessels are to stay clear." Jack nodded, but his eyes drifted back to the screen. He'd been studying alien life forms for 15 years, but something about this creature was different. While others saw only violence in the footage, he noticed patterns. The attacks weren't random. They were responses. "Look here," he said, rewinding the footage. "See how it approaches. It's not hunting. It's defending territory." He pointed to the way the creature's scales flashed in specific patterns before each attack. "And these color changes. They're too regular to be random." Commander Roberts crossed her arms. "The Council's top xenobiologists say it's pure predatory instinct. These things are mindless killing machines. 3 different species tried to study them. All failed." "Maybe that's the problem," Jack muttered. "They try to study them like animals." "Because they are animals, Miller. Dangerous ones." The commander's voice softened slightly. "Look, I know you're our best xenobiologist, but this isn't like your other projects. The Council's rated them Class X for a reason. No contact means no contact." Jack waited until she left before pulling up more data. The Razorfang, as humans had dubbed it, had appeared seemingly out of nowhere 3 months ago. Since then, every attempt to study or capture one had ended in disaster. The Melrathi, known for their advanced containment technology, had lost an entire research fleet. The Vorax, who prided themselves on understanding predator species, wouldn't go near them. But as Jack reviewed the footage again and again, he saw something everyone else had missed. The attacks always followed the same sequence: approach by another ship, attempted capture or scanning, color display from the Razorfang, and only then, attack. They were trying to communicate. He spent the next 12 hours compiling data, matching color patterns to events. His small office filled with holographic displays showing attack footage, sensor readings, and biological scans. The more he studied, the more convinced he became. A soft chime interrupted his work. The station's artificial day cycle was ending, dimming the lights to simulate evening. Jack stretched, his back cracking after hours of hunching over his desk. He should sleep, but his mind buzzed with possibilities. Just as he was about to leave, a new alert flashed across his screen. A research vessel had detected unusual energy readings at the edge of the quarantine zone. Jack's heart raced as he pulled up the data. The patterns matched his theories perfectly. He quickly typed out a message to Commander Roberts. "Request permission to investigate energy anomaly in Section 7. Possible breakthrough in Razorfang communication patterns." The response came almost immediately. "Denied. Maintain quarantine protocol." Jack stared at the message, then at the swirling patterns of data on his screen. In 15 years of research, he'd learned one thing. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a predator, but fear itself. He began typing again, this time a request for a small survey vessel. He'd listed as routine maintenance checks, well away from the quarantine zone. Sometimes, he thought, you had to break the rules to break new ground. As he submitted the request, he didn't know he was about to change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The warning lights continued to flash, ignored, as Jack began packing his research gear. Tomorrow would bring either a breakthrough or disaster, but either way, he was done just watching from a safe distance. The maintenance vessel, Small Wonder, drifted silently through space, its engines running quiet as Jack Miller watched his sensors. He'd managed to launch under the pretense of checking the station's outer sensor array, but his true destination lay just ahead. The edge of the quarantine zone. Base command to Small Wonder, his comm system crackled. You're approaching restricted space. Verify course correction. Jack took a deep breath. Small Wonder to base. Minor sensor malfunction. Correcting course now. He made a small adjustment to his trajectory, just enough to satisfy the watching eyes back at Edgepoint Station, but not enough to take him away from his real target. The energy readings had grown stronger over the past hour. Whatever was out here, it was big. His hand swept across the control panel, adjusting the sensitive detection equipment he'd smuggled aboard. The standard sensors wouldn't pick up the subtle electromagnetic patterns he'd identified in his research. A flash of movement caught his eye. Through the viewport, something massive shifted against the star-filled background. Jack's heart pounded as he activated his recording equipment. The ship's lights dimmed automatically, running on minimal power to avoid detection. Then he saw it. The Razorfang floated in space, less than a kilometer away. Up close, it was even more magnificent than the footage had shown. Its scales rippled with colors that seemed to bend the light around them. But something was wrong. The creature's movements were sluggish, and dark fluid leaked from a wound in its side. "It's injured," Jack whispered to himself, quickly checking his readings. The energy patterns coming from the creature were erratic, nothing like the organized sequences he'd studied. This wasn't a hunter patrolling its territory. This was a wounded animal seeking shelter. His comm system burst to life again. "Small Wonder, we're detecting a Class X entity in your vicinity. Return to base immediately." "This is a direct order." Jack looked at the wounded creature, then at his comm system. The Razorfang scales flickered weakly, sending out patterns that his modified sensors translated into data. The sequence matched what he'd identified as distress signals. "Small Wonder to base," he replied, his voice steady. "Negative on return. I'm observing a wounded specimen. It needs help. Have you lost your mind?" Commander Roberts' voice cut through the static. "That thing has destroyed ships 3 times your size." "It's intelligent," Jack insisted, his fingers flying over the control panel. "The attacks were defensive responses. Look at the data I'm sending you. The color patterns, the electromagnetic pulses, it's all communication." He watched as the Razorfang drifted closer. Its massive head turned toward his ship, eyes bigger than his vessel's windows studying him. Jack held his breath as those eyes fixed on him. They weren't the mindless predator eyes everyone feared. There was pain in them, and something else, intelligence. Slowly, carefully, Jack activated the external lights on his vessel. He'd spent hours programming them to replicate the patterns he observed. His ship began to pulse with soft blue light, repeating what he hoped was a peaceful greeting. The Razorfang scales shifted, weakly matching the pattern. Then it did something unexpected. It moved its injured side closer to Jack's ship, almost like it was showing him the wound. "My God," Jack breathed. "You understand, don't you? You know I'm trying to help." His comm system exploded with voices ordering him to retreat, but Jack tuned them out. He began programming a new light sequence, trying to communicate his intentions. The creature watched, its massive body surprisingly still. "Small Wonder to base," Jack said firmly. "I'm bringing it in. Clear Medical Bay 7 and tell Dr. Reed to prepare for a very unusual patient." "Miller, this is your last warning." "Look at the data," Jack interrupted. "It's asking for help. We have a chance to make first contact, real contact, with a species everyone else was too afraid to understand. I'm not letting that chance slip away. As if understanding his words, the Razorfang scales flickered again. A pattern Jack had never seen before. It was beautiful, complex, and deliberately directed at his ship. First contact wasn't just possible. It was happening right now. Trust goes both ways, Jack muttered, powering up his ship's tractor beam. As the gentle blue light reached out to the wounded creature, he hoped he wasn't about to make the biggest mistake of his life, or the greatest breakthrough in human history. Medical Bay 7 had been transformed overnight. The huge chamber, normally used for treating space whale injuries, now housed the wounded Razorfang. Security barriers hummed at every entrance, and nervous guards stood watch with weapons that everyone knew would be useless if the creature decided to attack. Jack stood before the main barrier, watching the Razorfang rest in the specially modified tank. He'd named it Storm, inspired by the way its scales rippled like lightning through clouds. The wound in its side was slowly healing, thanks to the medical team's careful work and Jack's constant guidance in interpreting Storm's reactions. "I still can't believe you're alive," Dr. Reed said, joining him at the barrier. She checked readings on her tablet. 3 days, and it hasn't shown any aggression. The council representatives are losing their minds trying to explain it. Jack smiled, watching Storm's scales shift through patterns he was learning to recognize. They're looking for explanations in the wrong place. Watch this. He stepped forward and activated the modified sensor array he'd built. The device sent out pulses of electromagnetic energy, matched with light patterns. Storm's head lifted immediately, and its scales blazed with answering patterns. "See these sequences?" Jack pointed to the readings appearing on their screens. "It's not random. Storm is actually counting prime numbers back to us. We're having a conversation." Dr. Reed's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The Council's best scientists said they were just predators." "The Council's best scientists tried to capture and study them like animals," Jack replied. "Nobody tried to talk to them first." As if proving his point, Storm moved closer to the barrier. Its massive head, nearly as long as Jack was tall, positioned itself at eye level with him. The creature's scales rippled with a now familiar pattern, what Jack had come to recognize as a greeting. "Hello to you too," Jack said softly, sending back a matching pattern through his equipment. Suddenly, alarms blared through the station. Jack's comm unit crackled to life with Commander Roberts' voice. "Miller, we've got 3 council ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're demanding to see the specimen." Jack felt his stomach tighten. He looked at Storm, whose scales had shifted to darker colors. Anxiety, he'd learned. "Tell them they need to follow our first contact protocols. No scanning equipment, no weapons. Storm can sense them, and will react to any threat." Minutes later, the medical bay doors opened. 3 council representatives entered. A tall, insectoid Melrathi, a fur-covered Vorax, and a crystalline Nexus. They stopped dead when they saw Storm floating freely in the tank. "This is a violation of council law," the Melrathi clicked. "The specimen should be restrained." "Storm is a patient, not a specimen," Jack said firmly. "And he's more intelligent than you've given his species credit for." The Vorax stepped forward, fur bristling. "Impossible. We tried to study them. They destroy our best research vessels." "Did you try asking permission first?" Jack activated his communication array. "Storm, would you show our guests what you showed me yesterday?" The Razorfang scales began to shift, creating complex patterns that rippled across its body. On the nearby screen, mathematical equations began appearing as Jack's equipment translated the patterns. That's advanced quantum theory," the Nexus whispered, its crystal body chiming in surprise. "Storm species doesn't build ships or use tools like we do," Jack explained. "They evolved to understand space itself. These equations describe slipstream currents and gravity wells we never knew existed." The council representatives watched in stunned silence as Storm continued its demonstration. The creature's scales painted theories and concepts the human scientists had spent decades trying to understand. But why do they attack ships? The Melrathi asked, mandibles clicking nervously. Wouldn't you defend yourself if someone tried to capture you without asking? Jack replied, Storm's people aren't aggressive. They're protective. Of themselves, their knowledge, and their freedom. As if understanding, Storm's scales flickered with what Jack now recognized as amusement. The pattern spread slowly across its massive body, like a smile made of light. The council representatives huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. Jack knew this was just the beginning. There would be debates, arguments, and probably more than a few diplomatic incidents. But as he watched Storm demonstrate another complex equation, he knew it was worth it. Sometimes understanding didn't come from forceful study or careful distance. Sometimes it came from having the courage to reach out and say hello. 2 weeks had passed since the council representatives' visit, and Edge Point Station had fallen into a new routine. The massive Medical Bay 7 had become Jack's permanent office, much to the confusion of his fellow researchers who still couldn't understand how he stayed so calm around the galaxy's most feared predator. Jack sat cross-legged on the observation platform, making notes as Storm demonstrated another concept. The Razorfang scales shifted through complex patterns, explaining something about deep space currents that Jack was still trying to understand. Hold on, Jack said, adjusting his translation equipment. Can you show me that part about solar winds again? Storm's scales rippled with what Jack now recognized as laughter. The massive creature curled its body, creating a three-dimensional display of swirling energy patterns with its bioluminescence. Amazing, Jack muttered, watching as Storm showed how its species navigated through space using these invisible currents. Your people don't just swim through space, you read it like a map. A soft chime interrupted their session. Dr. Reed entered, carrying fresh sensor readings. Jack, you need to see this. Storm's wound is completely healed. Jack looked at his friend, feeling a mix of joy and worry. According to station protocol, a healed patient meant a discharged patient. But Storm wasn't just a patient anymore. As if sensing his thoughts, Storm's scales shifted to a deep blue pattern, concern tinged with affection. The Razorfang moved closer to the platform where Jack sat, its massive head level with him. I know, Jack said softly. You're well enough to leave, but I hope you won't. Storm's response came as a complex pattern of lights racing across its scales. Jack's equipment translated. Much still to teach. Much still to learn. The door chimed again. This time Commander Roberts entered, followed by a group of human scientists who had arrived the previous day. Unlike the council representatives, these researchers had followed Jack's protocols, approaching Storm with respect rather than fear. Miller, Commander Roberts said, your latest reports are causing quite a stir back on Earth. They want to know more about what Storm's teaching us about space navigation. Jack smiled. Well, we were just discussing solar wind patterns. Storm, would you mind showing them? The Razorfang scales lit up eagerly, filling the chamber with swirling patterns of light. The scientists gasped as three-dimensional maps of space formed in the air around them, showing energy flows and currents invisible to human instruments. Remarkable, one scientist whispered. Their entire species evolved to read these patterns. No wonder our ships look clumsy to them. Storm's scales flickered with another message. Humans different. You ask, others take. You learn. Others fear. We're not so different, Jack replied, watching the beautiful display of lights. We both want to understand the universe. We just needed to learn how to talk to each other first. Commander Roberts shook her head in amazement. When you first brought Storm aboard, I thought you'd lost your mind. Now look, we're learning things about space travel that would have taken us centuries to discover on our own. Storm's next pattern made Jack laugh out loud. The scientists looked at him questioningly. Storm says we're like space infants learning to swim, Jack explained. but apparently were quick learners for a species that can't change colors. The chamber filled with the strange, harmonic vibration that Jack had learned was Storm's version of laughter. The sound no longer made the humans nervous. Instead, they smiled, watching the continued display of lights and energy patterns. A message flashed across Jack's screen, private this time. Friend Jack, my people come soon. Want to meet humans who learn. Want to share knowledge. Jack's heart raced with excitement. He'd suspected Storm had been communicating with others of its kind, but this confirmation opened up amazing possibilities. Commander, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, I think we're going to need a bigger medical bay. Storm's scales rippled with approval, the pattern spreading like waves of starlight across its massive body. The barrier between human and alien, predator and prey, had been broken not by force or fear, but by something much simpler: the willingness to listen and learn. The alarms on Edge Point Station screamed to life at exactly 3:47 a.m. station time. Jack Miller woke instantly, already running toward Medical Bay 7 before the announcement even finished. Security breach in progress. Unknown vessels approaching. He burst into the medical bay to find chaos. Storm's scales were flashing warning patterns in bright red and gold, filling the huge chamber with pulsing light. Through the bay's massive windows, Jack could see 3 ships approaching. Sleek, black vessels unlike anything in the Council's fleet. Pirates. Commander Robert's voice crackled through the comm. They're using stolen Melrathi tech. They must have heard about Storm. Jack reached the observation platform just as Storm's message flashed across his equipment. More coming. Hidden in the currents. They hunt my kind. Security team to Medical Bay 7. Roberts ordered through the station-wide comm. Protect that Razorfang. But Jack knew better. Storm didn't need protection. The pirates did. He'd seen what an angry Razorfang could do to ships. Storm, wait. Let me try to handle this first. The massive creature's scales settled into a calmer pattern, though still tinged with red warning colors. Jack had earned its trust, and Storm would wait. For now. The main door burst open. A group of heavily armed figures stormed in, wearing modified battle suits. Their leader, tall and wearing a captain's insignia, stepped forward. Well, the captain said through his suit's speaker. The rumors were true. A tame Razorfang, ready for catching. He turned to Jack. Step aside, researcher. This specimen is worth more than you'll earn in 10 lifetimes. Jack didn't move. Storm isn't a specimen. He's a sentient being and an honored guest of this station. The captain laughed. Honored guest, it's a weapon. The most dangerous predator in the galaxy. Do you know what military contractors would pay for its genetic code? Behind Jack, Storm's scales began to pulse with a pattern he'd never seen before. His translation equipment couldn't decode it, but he felt the meaning in his bones. It was a battle cry. Last chance, Jack said firmly. Leave now, or you'll learn exactly why Razorfangs are considered the most dangerous predators in space. The captain raised his weapon. Cute, take them both. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The pirates fired their weapons, neural nets designed to capture and contain. But Storm was already moving, its massive body flowing like liquid metal. The nets passed through empty space where the Razorfang had been a second before. Impossible, the captain whispered. Nothing that big can move that fast. Storm's scales erupted in blinding patterns, sending out electromagnetic pulses that made the pirates' weapons and suits spark and fail. The creature moved with incredible grace, herding the intruders into a corner without actually harming them. Jack quickly activated the station's containment field, trapping the pirates in place. Storm just demonstrated why his people don't need weapons. You can't fight something you can't predict or catch. Station security flooded in, taking the stunned pirates into custody. The captain stared at Storm with a mix of fear and awe. We were told they were just animals. That's your mistake, Jack replied. You tried to take without understanding. Storm's people have knowledge and technology beyond anything we've imagined. They just express it differently. Storm's scales shifted to a calmer pattern, displaying complex equations. Jack's equipment translated. Violence unnecessary. Knowledge freely given to friends. Force brings only failure. Commander Roberts arrived with a team of council investigators. The pirates' ships have been secured. Their database shows they've been hunting Razorfangs for months. Not anymore, Jack said, watching Storm create beautiful patterns with its scales. I think it's time the galaxy understood what we've learned here. The Razorfangs aren't weapons or specimens. They're probably the most advanced species we've ever encountered. Storm moved closer to Jack, its massive head level with the platform. Its scales rippled with the pattern that Jack had come to recognize as pride, not in itself, but in its human friend who had seen past fear to find understanding. 1 month after the pirate incident, Edge Point Station had become the busiest research center in human space. The huge window of Medical Bay 7 now looked out on an extraordinary sight. 3 more Razorfangs floated alongside Storm, their scales creating mesmerizing patterns of light against the backdrop of stars. Jack stood at his usual spot on the observation platform, surrounded by holographic displays showing translation data. He couldn't help smiling as he watched Storm teach the human scientists about space currents, while the other Razorfangs added their own insights through complex light patterns. The council representatives are here again, Commander Roberts said, joining him at the platform. 3rd visit this week. They're still trying to understand why the Razorfangs only talk to humans. It's simple, Jack replied, watching the beautiful display of lights. We were the first ones to just say hello instead of trying to capture or study them. Storm's scales flickered with agreement, creating a pattern that Jack's equipment translated. Humans see with hearts, not just eyes. Other species think size means danger. Humans look deeper. The chamber doors opened, admitting a group of council representatives. The Melrathi ambassador clicked his mandibles nervously as one of the new Razorfangs, a younger one Jack had named Flash, drifted closer to inspect the visitors. Remarkable, the Vorax ambassador said, watching Flash demonstrate a complex navigation technique. All our attempts to study them through force, and the humans succeed by simply being friendly. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Jack said. The Razorfangs have been watching spacefaring races for centuries, waiting for someone mature enough to approach them properly. Storm moved through the chamber, its scales creating a stunning display of mathematical formulas. The other Razorfangs joined in, their combined patterns filling the space with a symphony of light and knowledge. Jack's translation equipment worked overtime, recording new insights about space travel, energy flows, and natural phenomena that human scientists had never imagined. The human approach has merit, the crystalline Nexus ambassador chimed, its faceted body reflecting the light show. Perhaps we should revise our first contact protocols. Commander Roberts nodded. We've already started. Earth's government is establishing a new department of sinological relations based on what we've learned here. Jack's being promoted to head the program. Jack looked up in surprise. This was the first he'd heard of it. Storm's scales rippled with what he now knew was happiness, creating a pattern that meant deserved recognition. There's more, Roberts continued. The Razorfangs have offered to teach us about their method of space travel. Apparently, there are currents in space we never knew existed, highways between the stars that could revolutionize space exploration. The council representatives whispered among themselves. This was exactly what they'd hoped to learn from the Razorfangs, but had failed to gain through force and study. Now, freely offered through friendship, it would change everything. Friend Jack. Storm's pattern flickered across the translator. More of my people come. Many young ones want to learn from humans, want to teach humans too. Share knowledge. As if on cue, the station's sensors detected new arrivals. Everyone turned to the huge window, watching in awe as 5 more Razorfangs emerged from seemingly empty space, their scales painting patterns of greeting across the void. We'll need to build more observation bays, Roberts said, but she was smiling. "And train more xenobiologists in your communication methods, Jack." Jack watched as Storm welcomed the newcomers, their combined light patterns creating a beautiful aurora in the space around the station. What had started as one human's decision to help an injured creature had grown into something that would change both species forever. "You know what this means," Commander Roberts said quietly. "Everything we thought we knew about space travel, about communication, about what makes a species advanced, it's all going to change." Jack nodded, watching the Razorfangs dance through space in patterns that seemed to bend reality itself. Sometimes the biggest revolutions start with the smallest acts of kindness. Storm's scales flashed in agreement, painting words of ancient Razorfang wisdom across the stars. "Understanding bridges greater gaps than distance. Friendship opens doors force cannot break." 6 months had passed since the first group of Razorfangs arrived at Edge Point Station. The station itself had grown, with new observation bays and research centers sprouting like crystal gardens in space. But today, Jack Miller stood in the original Medical Bay 7, preparing for his biggest journey yet. "Are you sure about this?" Commander Roberts asked, watching as Jack packed his modified translation equipment. No human has ever traveled with a Razorfang through deep space before. Jack looked through the massive window where Storm waited, scales shimmering with excitement. The Razorfang had grown even larger over the months, its body now stretching nearly 40 meters. Yet none of the humans on the station feared it anymore. "Someone has to be first," Jack replied, checking his specialized spacesuit. The Razorfangs had helped design it, incorporating their understanding of space currents and energy fields. "Besides, Storm says it's time I learned to really swim in space." Around them, the research center buzzed with activity. Dozens of scientists worked with different Razorfangs, learning about everything from quantum physics to stellar navigation. On the main screen, a map showed dots of light spreading across the galaxy, places where other human stations had made contact with Razorfang pods. "Your friend changed everything," Roberts said, nodding toward Storm. "The Council's rewriting their entire first contact protocol based on what happened here. They're calling it the human approach now." Jack laughed. "Storm says we just did what came naturally. Humans may look small and weak to other species, but we know how to make friends." Storm's scales flickered with a message. "Time to go, friend Jack. Much to show you." The chamber filled with other researchers coming to watch the historic moment. The Razorfang had explained that it could create a protective field around Jack's suit, allowing him to travel through space the way they did, riding currents and waves that human ships had never detected. "The monitoring equipment is ready," Dr. Reed said, handing Jack a small data recorder. "Try to document everything you can about how they move through space. This could revolutionize space travel." Jack nodded, but his mind was already on the journey ahead. Storm had promised to show him something special, a place where space itself folded in ways that defied human understanding. As he prepared to exit through the airlock, a message flashed from the station's communication array. Jack smiled as he read it. The Council had just officially reclassified the Razorfangs from Class X threat to Class A sapient species. More importantly, they had approved the creation of a permanent human Razorfang cultural exchange program. "Ready?" he asked Storm through his suit's communication system. The Razorfang scales painted patterns of excitement across space. Other Razorfangs gathered around, their combined light show creating a farewell display that made the stars themselves seem dim. Jack took a deep breath and stepped out of the airlock. Storm moved closer, its massive body curling protectively around Jack's small form. He felt a tingling sensation as the Razorfang's bioelectric field enveloped his suit, just as they had practiced in simulations. "Good luck," Commander Roberts' voice crackled through his comm. "Try not to rewrite too many laws of physics while you're out there." "No promises," Jack replied, watching in amazement as Storm's scales began to glow with navigation patterns. "Storm says we're about to travel in ways human ships never could." The Razorfang's message scrolled across his helmet display. Together, we show Galaxy New Way. Not biggest or strongest, but smartest. Humans and Razorfangs, teaching others to see with hearts. As they prepared to depart, Jack looked back at Edgepoint Station. What had started with a simple act of kindness had grown into something that would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. Not through force or fear, but through friendship and understanding. "Ready when you are, old friend," Jack said softly. Storm's scales blazed with joy, and together they moved into the depths of space, riding currents of energy that only the Razorfangs could see. Behind them, Edgepoint Station grew smaller, but its legacy grew larger. A reminder that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from conquering the unknown, but from befriending it.